Welcome to another conversation in practical theology. I'm Eric Stoddart, and with me, as usual, is my colleague and friend Saiyyidah Zaidi. We're going to be talking today about pilgrimage. I've not been on a pilgrimage. I have walked places, but I've not done it as an intentional pilgrimage. But Saiyidah's been on pilgrimage, so we thought it would be great to have a conversation around practical theology, spirituality, and pilgrimage. Zaida, tell us a bit about one of your pilgrimages that you've gone on, just so we can get an idea of what this is about.
Hi, and welcome to all of our listeners as well. So I've done, it feels as if I've done quite a few pilgrimages, but at the same time, I feel as if I'm still a baby in all of this. Actually, I was born prematurely, and it's relevant, as you'll see in a moment. So I was born prematurely, and my dad decided that it would be a great idea, because I was born a month early, for us to go on Hajj, which is the big pilgrimage to Mecca. And so most people have seen in the news or somehow on social media pictures and things like that from the pilgrimage, because many millions of people travel from all over the world to do that particular rite and ritual, and also it's a massive pillar in Islam. So I did that when I was 2 weeks old, and clearly I cannot remember anything, but for me, just knowing that I did that early, and that my parents made the efforts to take me, for me it's a huge sacrifice on their part, but it also made me feel pretty special. Now, as an adult, I did the Hajj pilgrimage about 6 months after getting married. And that was a really interesting journey in itself, because in terms of marriage Islamically, a woman is entitled to something called a mahar. And within that, it's like, it's part of the marriage contract. And so one of the things that I asked for in my mahar, which is, it can be monetary, there are incidents of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, who also gave things like recitation of the Quran and things like that for their mahar. But I think marriage is conversation for another conversation in practical theology. So I said to my husband that one of the things I'd like is the opportunity to go on Hajj. So 6 months after getting married, we did that. And in many respects, that was very pivotal, I think, to our relationship then going forward. Because when you go on Hajj, you prepare everything as if you may not come back. And, so, you know, the percentage of people that die in Hajj is usual to the rest of the population as a whole globally. But what happens is that because we hear that a number of people have died, there's just something within us as humans that makes us respond in a, oh my gosh, I've got to prepare everything. But also actually the kind of prophetic tradition for preparing to go on pilgrimage is to prepare as if you're ready to leave this world. So we had conversations around what would happen if one of us died. And it was kind of like, well, mourn me, but also carry on with your life. And that in itself has had some really interesting kind of ramifications in our marriage, because I think that's helped us to always remember that we're together because we want to be together rather than because of convenience, if that makes sense. So for me, that was an amazing experience. And I'll share a couple of really cool things that happened for me then. Is one night we were in the top of the mosque, so that it's kind of open to the skies, and there was somebody who was sitting there from Japan who was having tea from a teapot. Now, we couldn't exchange a word because I don't speak any Japanese and they didn't speak any English, but we were united around tea. And so he gave us some of his tea, and it was just such a wonderful memory to think that even though you may not actually understand somebody in terms of language, you can understand people in a different way, whether that be emotions or spirituality or anything like that.
It sounds like there's a preparation stage, And that seems to be about relationship with who you're going on pilgrimage with, relationship with God, relationship with yourself. And then there's the social element of it when you're there. And then what's the next sort of element to this experience?
So you kind of go through the rites of the pilgrimage, and anybody that's interested to understand what that is can, literally Google up Hajj and how to do it. And so you're kind of following in the footsteps of Abraham. And for me, it's a very incredible experience. What happened to me having done it, so I think I was 30 when I did my pilgrimage, or when I did the Hajj, and when I'd completed it, even there I felt a huge sense of relief, because in Islam you have 5 pillars of Islam. Now the first one is testimony of faith, then you have prayer, you have charity or zakat, you have fasting, and you have Hajj. And 4 of these pretty much anyone can do anywhere, in any location. But the opportunity to go on the pilgrimage is really quite rare. I think in the West, we take it for granted because of course you have to save, and it's becoming quite expensive now, but it's within reach. In some other countries, people will save their entire lives and then sell everything that they have just so that they can go. So when I did this, I just felt this enormous sense of relief, because I was like, I've completed my 5 pillars of Islam. It was really profound. And even to this day, I just look back and I think it was so special.
Can I ask about people who simply can't afford to get on to go on Hajj?
Yeah.
Is there anything like a sort of local mini pilgrimage that can substitute? Are there some rituals or traditions that people can do sort of as a substitute if they can't get the distance?
So there are things that you can do that give you the equivalent reward of a lesser pilgrimage, which is called the Umrah. But one thing that I think is important to know is that the Hajj is not obligatory upon anyone who does not have the means. So if you cannot afford it, if your circumstances are such that you cannot go, whatever the reason, it's not an obligation upon you. And I think what I see is a lot of people quite rightly have the desire to go, but are unable to go, and then feel the stress of that. And so my advice in those situations is always to pray, because if you're meant to go, God will show you the path and the way. But when you're feeling frustrated about not being able to go, I mean, a simple thing that anyone can do in their house is that after the early morning prayer, so after the Fajr prayer, if you sit in your kind of place of prayer and just be in worship until the sun has risen, and stay there, and then pray kind of 2 units of prayer, you get the equivalent reward of a Umrah, which is a lesser pilgrimage. So that, it's in many ways, it's as if God has given us the blessing of the reward without doing the actual activity and the trip. But I think your heart always yearns to go there, because for Muslims, Mecca is the house of God, and when you see it for the first time, it's incredible. It's overwhelming. And I suppose I can't think, what comes to my mind is when people go to see the Pope or to go to the Vatican, and for Catholics, there must be such a deep connection there. And that could be for some individuals a trip of a lifetime. So I don't think that there is anything equivalent in other religions that I'm aware of on the scale of the Hajj, but I know that there are other pilgrimages that exist, if that makes sense.
How does it feature as something you do as an individual in your relationship with God, and something that you do with the people that you know who are going on pilgrimage with you, and the others, the anonymous thousands, is it not even millions sometimes?
Millions, yeah.
So is it a solitary thing? Is it a community thing? Or how does that all work together?
So you're kind of, you're always focused on your relationship with God. But the people that you go with in many respects can end up being quite random, you know, and so you have no idea of the group that you're being put with. And there will, you know, just as with the whole of humanity, there will be people that you get on really well with, there'll be people that you find challenging, but I think all of these experiences are there to test us and to teach us lessons. One thing that I will say is that, so I did the Hajj maybe 18 years ago. I know that if I need anything, or if anyone, you know, needs something, or if something happens, one phone call and these people will be there just like your family. So for example, one of the brothers, one of the men that went on, that was in our group, he was the kind of unofficial doctor for our group, and he passed away a few years ago, and we didn't really have much contact with him since, but you know, so many of us went out of our way to go to his funeral because there was that bond there.
What makes it different from simply doing a walk? Because you know, I've done this in Cuthbert's Way, which goes from Melrose and the Scottish borders to Lindisfarne to Holy Island, but I did that as a walk. You're describing something really very, very different. How is it different from just a walk with people to a site as a tourist?
So the Hajj and the Umrah are very, very specific pilgrimage kind of rituals that have been set for us, and these are kind of, the journey was one that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, did himself. And so I kind of get what you're saying, but because you've got the rites and the rituals that are associated with that. So for example, you know, you walk between two kind of mountains called Safa and Marwa, and you circumambulate the Kaaba 7 times. And so, and then there's kind of other things that you can do that are associated with the Hajj or the Umrah. These rituals are very, very specific. So I understand why it could be seen as just a walk, but when you're doing it and you're doing it with the intention, of course, of the Hajj, then it's more than just that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's about intention as well as the ritual tradition.
Yes.
This is something about in your heart, you're doing this for a very specific purpose.
Yeah, I mean, you actually have to make the specific intention that you're going for Hajj, and or that you're going for Umrah, and then you receive the reward. You can't just kind of do the routine without that intention. It wouldn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. I've seen 1 or 2 video clips of the walking around at Mecca. It looks to me absolutely terrifying because of so many people in one place. What is that actually like?
So I think my own experience is that it is quite busy. You know, one could equate it to being on a tube, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that God, in his infinite ways, enables us to feel as if we have more space than we do. And so you kind of get caught up and you get lost in that moment and the activity that you're doing. And it could be because you're in flow, and, you know, but whatever happens, there have been times when it's been really, really busy, and it can be quite a stressful experience. But then I think, you know, you receive what you're focusing on. So if you focus on the fact that there are, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of other people there doing the same thing as you, then of course it would be overwhelming. And for me as a introvert, I probably wouldn't want to go there. But one is focused on the reason why one is there, you know. And so whilst there may be a lot of people around you, I think you do, you make a decision whether you allow yourself to get caught up in the overwhelm of the people or the overwhelm of the activity and your relationship with God.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's not just intention, but you've got to be continually reflecting on what's happening around about you, so that you're able to focus on why you're doing this, and not just the surroundings, but you're constantly reflecting inwardly about what's happening. Is that right?
Yes, but I think less deliberately than that. I just think it happens naturally, you know. And as a practical theologian, kind of like looking back on my experience of Hajj, I don't think I really understood what I was doing in terms of the where is God in this, because it's constant. Even when you're eating, you're in awe of where God is, and you know, the fact that, you know, he's enabled you to be in that space, to have that very special experience. So it's as if you're just living and breathing it. It doesn't really require a huge amount of deliberate thought, although it may do at the beginning and it might in the preparation, but once you land, you're just caught up in the awe.
That makes a lot of sense. And I wonder about broadening out our conversation a little bit beyond the pilgrimages of our respective faiths, because there are roots and there are traditions that are very specific. But then there are roots that seem to be not tied to one particular faith. And I get the sense that there's an emerging idea of pilgrimage, certainly within Great Britain, about walking together and going to sites of some sort of spiritual significance that could not be tied to Christianity necessarily, but are a broader experience. And I wonder what you make of this idea of pilgrimage that's not specific to a particular faith tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important for us as individuals to create opportunities to reflect. So I was sharing with you before we started this about the British Pilgrimage Trust, and I'm not associated with them, but I'm a real advocate of the work that they do, because I love the concept of starting a journey in one place and following in the footsteps of previous kind of religious leaders to end up to another destination. Because clearly I am not Christian, but when I follow in the footsteps of these other people, I'm trying to reflect on what was their suffering, what was their journey, why were they doing what they're doing. And I think these things are common to all of humanity. And when you share a journey like that with people of other faiths or people of no faith, you're sharing something that's really quite poignant and special.
Yeah, and that connection to history and to the wider traditions in our culture. There's in Durham, there's a relatively new statue of I think it's about 6 monks carrying the coffin of St. Cuthbert, and it's life size, and it's there in the city centre. And it wasn't there when I did the St. Cuthbert's Way, just as a walk before, but part of that route was the route they'd taken carrying Cuthbert's body. And just to see that statue and to connect with something really ancient and something that was, yeah, it was done in a great time of turmoil. They were having to do this because of raiders coming. And so at the same time as it being comforting, it's a sort of reminder of just how unstable life can sometimes be on, to use the TV reality show word, the journey.
Yeah, but also I think it kind of reminds us that really life is very fragile, and particularly fragile for people who are expressive about religion. Today, I think, you know, globally we live in a secular world, and of course, you know, the kind of tension between secularism and religion, whatever your faith may be, is becoming more and more apparent. And so I think as a Muslim, I sometimes feel a little bit ostracized just for having a faith. But I know that experience is also very similar for Christians and Jews and Hindus and Sikhs. So it's not one that's unique to a particular religion. But understanding that struggle that we're experiencing today and somehow trying to connect that with the struggles of people in history, I think actually gives you some level of strength.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's something also about simply being out of doors, because for so many of us, our lives are lived within one set of four walls, and then it's a car or public transport and another set of four walls. And unless we're really intentional, well, I certainly find that I can go for a long time without, in a sense, properly being out of doors.
Yeah.
Going in between places, but not really out of doors.
I agree with you entirely, because the interesting thing about that is that, you know, parkrun, for example, is an activity that is now global, and it's a 5-kilometer run that people do on a Saturday morning. Now, it's you know, on the whole, it's a very kind of non-religious, non-associated with anything activity. But when you do it, you sometimes, I know when I've done it and I've been struggling in the run, my call is, God help me. So that then can become even a religious experience. And a few months ago, I was speaking about pilgrimage with Christians and Muslims in Oxford. And there we were saying that places of worship are also different as well. So we have, of course, we have, you know, the churches and the mosques and the synagogues and the temples, but people also treat their coffee shops as kind of places of worship, you know, because without the cup of coffee, they feel as if they can't start the day. And somebody else might say, without a prayer, I feel as if I can't start the day. So when you look at that journey, whilst it might look mundane on the surface, if the intention is there, there are ways for how it could become much deeper. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Just yesterday, I was teaching my first year undergraduates, Helen Cameron, the practical theologian's work on different cultural forms of Christian church. And one of those is about her parallel with third place secular meeting places. And the coffee shop is an example of that. And she was trying to think about how different forms of church maybe match up with coffee shop culture. And I was saying to my students, you know, they're 19, 20 years old. I remember before there were coffee shops like Costa and Starbucks and all of those, when there were little tea rooms that you would go in, maybe taken by your parents, and it was all very chintzy sort of thing. Or there were these sort of cheap, sort of pseudo-American diners, but there wasn't anything like coffee shop culture. And so you couldn't sit there for a day with your laptop or whatever it would have been. But something has changed in society with the coffee shop culture, and it's that gathering together in a third place. And I just wonder if that pilgrimage idea is part of that whole movement about trying to reconnect and find space together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think pilgrimage is a reset in many ways. So for the Hajj, once you've completed your rituals of Hajj, you are seen by God as completely sinless. So you come back as a newborn baby. So it is a reset. You know, and I think that's exactly what you're describing. It's a kind of a reconnection with who we are, but also reconnecting with the community and people that are important to us.
Yeah, and that reconnection in societies that are often, we talk about network society and people connecting, and maybe someone, I forget who it was, just recently mentioned that our connections could be like, we each individually post something on a notice board and then walk away and someone else comes along behind us and posts something else. and we sort of assume that that's relationship and real connection, but it is just us walking by and sticking something on a notice board and then someone else, that we're in danger of losing. They were saying that the skill of being able to actually verbally communicate in real time, the facility of texting and the like, can take us away from actual communication with people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But I also think that it's, you know, what is it that you are open to as an individual? Because I went into a shop a couple of days ago, and it's really funny because I wanted to buy this thing for a while and booked an appointment, and in the end I was met by somebody else, which was a surprise, but it was fine. We spoke for half an hour, and as we were leaving, this is very unusual for me, but as we were leaving, we kind of gave each other a hug and exchanged phone numbers and things like this. You don't do that with a salesperson normally, right? And we were both wondering, why have we done this? And it's because I think we were both open to the fact that there was some form of a connection that was there, and we didn't want to leave it at the end of that conversation. So I feel as if I've made a new friend, and she does as well. But if you're not open to this, then of course everything is just done via email and social media and things like this. So you have got that feeling. It's just, are you willing to listen to your intuition or to whatever it is that's going on for you?
Yeah, I like that idea of the openness to connection, because it takes me back to, okay, the walk. I'm not going to call it a pilgrimage of the St. Cuthbert's Way that I did. And it was hard work. That openness to actually crossing the countryside, to not taking a bus or a car, to having to walk up a hill. I vividly remember crossing the sort of, on the final day, it was thick fog, and my friend and I, we arrived just at the edge of the coast, and then you wait till the tide parts and you can cross on the causeway. And I thought, oh, right, okay, just across the causeway and we're there. But the thick fog, I didn't realize we'd only reached the edge of the island. There was about another 3/4 of an hour walk, and I had walked all day, and I was tired, I was fed up, and I couldn't see where the horizon was, because it was thick fog. And I thought, this is a metaphor that I really don't have the energy to explore just now. But it was hard work to make that connection with nature, with the outdoors. It would have been so much easier just to take a bus.
It would, but you see, this is, for example, when people do the Camino de Santiago in Spain, there is an option to cycle or to take a bus for part of the journey. Now, my question is, are you looking for a physical experience of the journey? Are you actually open up to the raw emotions and the psychological journey that you could go on? And the spiritual journey, of course, because if you're open to those things, then the physical movement of the actual walk itself is just one element of it. And I think the struggle that you're describing is part of that journey, because there's so many different ways that you could interpret that. But I know for me, in fact, I think for the majority of the human race, when we experience struggle, who do we call out to? We call out to God. Even if you have no faith, chances are, if you were about to get hit by a bus, you'd call to God.
I'm sure that's true for so many people. And it is that, maybe come back to that word openness, and what that we're open to in going on pilgrimage or walk with the outdoors or other people. It seems to be that the intention there to be open to different sort of connection.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think connecting with who you are as an individual, connecting with God, these things, they're not easy anymore. You know, and society is just teaching us to become robots. You know, we get up, have a coffee, go to work, go home, eat dinner, go to sleep. And you know, if that is all life is, it's a real lost opportunity. Because when you know who you are, when you understand your relationship with your creator, I think you're able to be much better individual within your community, within your family, and within wider society. And if you use a pilgrimage as an opportunity to reset, or you just take time out for, you know, a walk in the park to do that, it's fine, it works. But that reflection is really, really critical.
Well, Saiyyidah, we should probably bring things to close there, but as usual, we've covered a vast range of things. We've talked about your experience of Hajj. We've talked about the religious traditions of that. We've talked about practical theology and secular third spaces of meeting, and we've reflected on openness and connectedness. As usual, we've covered a whole host of things, and to our viewers and listeners, we hope that you've enjoyed hearing another conversation in practical theology. We will be back with another topic in the not too distant future. So thank you for watching or for listening, and do feel free to put something in the comments below. But for the moment, from Eric Stoddart, goodbye, and also from Saiyyidah Zaidi.
Goodbye.